Hello, viewers. A good afternoon. First and foremost, Happy New Year. We hope that the year has begun on a good note for you, but also we hope that you have those resolutions up and running. Well, this time around, we shall not speak in hindsight, but shall try to project and anticipate the events that will shape the year 2023 from the political, social, and economic lens. But we know that the events that will unfold this year, some of them will build from the happenings or unsettled conversations of the year 2022 and before that. And to discuss this with us is a panel of distinguished senior citizens of this country that is now my privilege to introduce to you this afternoon. And from the center is Dr. Sarah Bireete, who is the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance. Doctor, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Moses, for hosting me, and a happy new year to the viewers.
Yes, thank you. I would ask you to share with us your New Year and festive experience slightly after. But let me for now introduce retired Major Awich Pollar, who is the Director of External Relations at the NRM Secretariat. Director, many thank you for being
Thank you,
And acting head of legal.
legal.
Acting Director Legal. Oh, thank you so much, and Happy New Year to our viewers.
Thank you very much, retired Major. And next myself is Professor Ndebesa Mwambustya from Makerere University. Professor, thank you for being here.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers out there, and I wish you a happy and democratic 2023.
All right, democratic. Let's just
As it was
begin.
in 2022.
As it was.
2022.
Yeah, retired Major, as we begin this conversation, on a lighter note, could you share with us your festive season experience, first of all, but secondly, what events, in your own view, do you think shall be carried on? Okay, what unsettled conversations do you think will be carried on from the previous year to this particular year? We know that the tweeting general has continued to tweet. Events like the Makerere University convocation election that happened last year have spilled over to this year. So as we evaluate, what do you think are some of those events that have been carried forward and settled business for this year?
The end of year on my side was quite uneventful. There's nothing which could come out of the normal flow of things. But I continued to witness the world as it unfolds. The war between Ukraine and Russia continued, and it affects all of us. We also watched a very successful World Cup, which was so entertaining, and I think it was professional. But also you saw many deaths happening, at least at the global level, the Pope and the Pele and others, and even internally here, head of civil service, former head of civil service. So those are a few occurrences. What I know will continue to transfer, which I may talk later in detail, is the governance issues with the country. As Professor says, wishing a 2023 democratic. We as a party plan that we should have a stable country, free from insecurity, all sorts of insecurity, military and non-military insecurity, including food security. So it will be things that will continue to bother us, and we shall definitely make sure that the conversation continues and we maintain the stability, which is finally reflected in the welfare and the well-being of the citizens. So that will preoccupy us. Along this line also, we shall continue to have a specific institutional governance. For example, you mentioned Makerere University. Makerere University is an institution governed by an act of parliament, and it has under its institutions like the convocation, like in the case of Makerere, I belong to that also because I'm an alumni of Makerere. So we expect that these institutions with the law governing it should continue to be law-abiding and work institutionally in accordance to the law, so that it satisfies the aspirations of everybody. In government, of course, as you're aware, it's not in an abstract. It falls under a line mandate of a particular ministry. And in our manifesto, there's no area which is abstract, which is not covered. Only that the the agent that is implementing it should do what it does. So whatever happened, like in Makere and any other institutions, therefore, we think that it is something which could transcend. The discussion should move in from 2022 to 2023 so that every institutions of governance, it works according to the law and according to the norms and the aspirations. Because any failure anywhere is like part of a body. Any failure or any pain in the toe, the whole body will feel it. And for us, any failure or misgivings at any institutional level, it affects the party because nothing is in vacuum. It's all in the government. So that is a few things that I want to share.
All right, thank you. Doctor, let me just come to you. If you were keen to observe towards the end of last year, the political conversations, more so online, around transition, were being dominated by the yellow camp. Either it was the first son who was talking about it, or it was the president, or someone from the NRM camp. But towards the end, we saw the opposition political parties holding a joint prayer conference or something like that. Is this the opposition trying to reclaim the space around the conversation of transition?
Well, the debate on transition has been here with us for quite some time, especially given the fact that we have never peacefully transited as a country from one leader to another. Maybe only the space between Benais and Rud, I think there is one person where there was a handover there from the Mwanga Commission.
Maybe Mwanga.
A Mwanga Commission,
Mwanga
after that rigged
Bote.
election, to Bote too. I think that's the only peaceful handover of power from a military junta, because that was a military commission chaired by Paul Mwanga, and the current president was the vice chair of that junta that organized the contested election. So also from that, you can't call it peaceful, really. Maybe the only peaceful handover of power that this country has ever seen was from the colonialists to Obote, as then the first prime minister received the instruments of independence.
Although he was not head of state.
No, he was a prime minister.
So the colonists remained head of state.
Yeah. So really, the debate is as old as the independent Uganda. Although some people want to monopolize that debate, and the NRM thinks that they should be in charge, especially after destroying or amputating our constitution, removing the framework for transition. So that's why you see there is a lot of uncoordinated movement. Nobody knows the direction of the country. People will tell you we have elections. The people will determine. But what kind of elections are we talking about? The nature of our national elections were what was recently exhibited in the Makere convocation elections. You have the military beating people, you have the police, you have people disappearing. The country hasn't recovered from the abductions that started in the run-up to the 2021 elections. So what you and sorry about the incident where you had sleep in the coolers. So you actually experienced what opposition goes through in the national elections, that people think those are the nature of elections that should guide the transition. So basically, we have no framework for transition in the absence of free and fair elections.
So can the opposition successfully reclaim that conversation that has been dominated by the yellow camp?
It should be a conversation for Ugandans.
Not just the opposition.
Yeah, not just politicians, not just the ruling party or opposition. It should be a concern of all Ugandans, and it should be a conversation dominated by Ugandans as to how the power given to them under Article 1 of the Constitution to determine how they should be governed at all levels. But Ugandans are scared of the transition because of the toxic political environment that we are operating in, thanks to the NRM junta. So that's why you see now the president, the son, it's as if we are under a monarchy. And now historians have come out to say President Museveni is still here for another term. But that's what they said in 2001. One more term, and we hand over power. So now they are saying the debate that the country had in 2001 is now what the NRM historicals are promising the country. One more term. I saw the statement of General Kaindo Tafiri to say, and this is the second year after elections, but they are already in high-gear campaigns, as if they have no work to do. So to say that give the president one more term, but that's what they've been telling people. So when will the conversation of one more term end?
Good question. Professor, let me come to you straight away. Last year was, we had some incidents of by-elections. This year as well, the unfortunate demise of the Honorable Member of Parliament from Socio County still now places before us another by-election. And I think the Electoral Commission has set dates for that as well. I will verify. But as we move towards such political events that will take shape this year, do you anticipate that there will be more or less of what we saw in Kayunga, in Omoro, or perhaps this time the opposition shall be much more prepared to face the NRM? So how do we anticipate by-elections, for example, to unfold this year?
How would the opposition be prepared? Prepared to fight?
Prepared to...
Because our elections is just a matter of warfare and thuggery. So to be prepared, you must be prepared to fight.
Not to mobilize the people?
Mobilize people to fight. Because you mobilize people to do what now?
To vote.
Because
did you vote
in every elections, we see a situation of violence. Organizing violence, whether it is Makerere as it were, even during the guild elections, actually somebody was even murdered.
Yeah.
And when you saw Kayunga, even the candidate, I think, had bruises. So our elections is like warfare. In Uganda, or some Bantu languages, they call it akaruru. It is literally, akaruru means alarm. It literally means alarm. Anyway, the elections to be free and fair, by the way, some people don't look at fairness. It must be fair from the process, from the beginning. Even if the balloting was to be free, you have to look at the fairness of the process. So, and also the design of the electoral process. The design of the electoral process in Uganda, in my personal opinion, is such that it does not, you don't expect a democratic inclusiveness at the end of the exercise as an outcome. Because we are in a multi-ethnic society, a multicultural society, a multi-religious society. We are not yet a nation state. We should be having an electoral design that would result into inclusive democracy or inclusiveness. The current winner-take-it-all system, even if the elections were to be free and fair, they would lead to a governance crisis in the country. There will be those who will feel that they are left out and they are not part of the system. And when they say we were left out, because here we don't have parties that are ideologically determined, those who will feel that they are out, most likely they will be an ethnic group, they could be a regional group, they could be actually a religious group. And once you have such an identity feeling insecure of exclusion, then the end result of that architecture of political process will not be accepted and is likely to cause tension and tension around identities. So there are those who win and celebrate and even brag that they have won, but I think it is democracy and national integration. Me, I'm more interested in national integration than even the whole issue of democracy. It loses out. So let's go to these exercises for purposes actually of increasing tension. So elections in Uganda, far from providing an opportunity for national harmony, for selection of competent leaders and for providing an opportunity to challenge those who are in power with alternative ideas. Elections is preparation for tension. So the more elections we have, the more tension. So more or less, if you were a security strategist like my friend here, you would have to look at elections as a security risk, especially here in Uganda, but generally in Africa, elections is a security risk. So when they are making a risk assessment, they should put their elections, because when there is no fairness, people are likely to have anger, and that anger could take contours that you may not predict. Therefore, elections in Uganda is not an occasion for building sustainable society. Elections in Uganda has been so bastardized that it is an occasion for preparing more tensions for the future that none can predict.
Retired Major, the obvious concerns that you have to respond to, the nature of our elections, they, if I'm to borrow the words of Professor, they are an opportunity to build tension in the country. But as you respond to that, my question to you is that, could you paint for us a picture of what, to many of us, okay, to what is seen out there as if there are contradictions within the NRM? There is one camp saying Muzei Tovaku main, then there is the other camp of standby generator. I don't know, are there any contradictions between the historicals versus the young Turks in the NRM, of course, led by the first son? I don't know, could you paint for us a picture of that? But then secondly, the issue of our elections. Are they worthy being held?
Maybe I answer your question later, but I respond to the issues that you are talking about election. What Dr. Sarah said about the discussion of transition, and it came from your insistence questioning whether it is only the NRM discussing or the opposition and the space and all that. But I think for me, discussing a transition, to me, it is really not called. It is why would we? Because the Constitution is clear. Every 5 years, we change a leader. Now, the current constitutional dispensation, of course, as Sarah referred to, the other caps of either term limit or age limit were removed by the lawmakers. And we believe that they did their due diligence. I'm not a lawmaker myself. Now, this therefore leaves us the only option of the regular 5 years. So if we now know that after every 5 years we are going to vote, then what is there to be discussed?
But is transition an event or a process?
It's automatically built in there that should you vote this one out, then you get another. So I don't see.
But can I come in here and maybe reframe the question?
Sure.
Are we talking about a transition or succession? The two are not
the
necessarily
diction used here. The diction used here was transition, and therefore I was picking it from that diction, that choice of words. I did not want to bring in my own word of a succession.
Can I give you information?
The diction used here, unless I didn't hear succession mentioned here.
Yeah, I wish to inform the director of NRM, double director, that the Constitution provides for free and fair regular elections. I know that the NRM establishment only looks at the regularity of elections without consideration of the freeness and fairness of elections. But I think it is irregular for you on this program to say that the Constitution creates regular elections. We have regular elections.
5 years.
Can we have free and fair, like provided for in the Constitution, not just the regular elections as an exercise?
It is provided for. But my comment on that is that the free fairness, courts have tried to define what it amounts to. Okay? But even the court's definition, many people are not satisfied with it. I think it was argued in the Supreme Court, especially when the courts tried to say there was effect but was not substantial. And so I do not want to go into, because in my opinion, we always have free and fair. But even the unfairness, the lack of unfairness, I am a complainant. I'm not saying election is 100% perfect. In fact, if we were to go into the flows of the election, I have a lot to say, in which even impact on the current quality of legislature. That one I have my cry and I have my position. But the fairness is debated, the court argued it, what does it amount to, fair or not fair? But so far it is a free and fair process. That is what the law provides. Now, therefore, the debate on whether or not we are going to have we should have a transition, even if you stretch it to the professor's imported diction of succession, I don't see it even, if you call it a succession, the fairest you can do is that it is an intra-organizational debate. If you're talking of succession, then you are using it within the specific parties. Okay? But you cannot use a succession at a national level because that is akin. There is no word like succession in Ugandan constitutional framework. Maybe you can use it at intra-organization like NRM, that you have had the founding chairman for long. So the understanding is that whoever will come will succeed or succession of that one. But you cannot use succession in the national framework. It is akin, it is not there.
It was there and it was removed because term limits provided for succession actually.
So we don't have it now. So succession, the least you can have a debate on succession is within a given party. Therefore, I find that debate unwanted. The other thing I wanted to comment is the issue of winner takes it all that the professor said. I like to agree with the professor. For example, there's a school of thought which is saying, professor, that if you have the president of FDC, the flag bearer, who lost the presidency, but you really clearly see on the ballot paper that 2 million people believe in him, what do you do with such a person? Do you throw him away? To me, that is the nearest of winner take it all. So some school of thought think that there should be a legal framework whereby such a person, he has lost an election, but can be brought on board. I'm not so sure about the situation. I have not grasped well your ethnic and the religious part of it. But what I know is that if somebody loses an election, but he clearly has that at a national level, do you leave him? So that maybe if we address such a debate will clearly put us in a fairer position of not saying winner takes it all. So that is my comment on that. The other comment is, okay, I talked right about the electoral process. The electoral process, I am saying the fairness or not, electoral process, we still have a lot to do. And this affects even the quality of our leaders at all levels, whether legislature or even at sub-county level. So, as we are saying, as they rightly put it, it's not on the polling day itself, but the whole process. How do you, for example, control the effect of economic influence? The law provides against use of money or use of material, but it's being used. So it is perfectly okay for somebody to buy a warrant and a poor candidate wins against a good one. Good in abstract terms. Okay, so I am saying the fairness is a matter of debate.
Then your comment on the two camps, one saying Muzei Tova Kumain,
I thought that was your substantive question.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so, I said I was referring to this, I was coming to your substantive question, unless I overstayed on this. The question of, you put it in terms of contradictions. I must admit to you that in every phenomenon there is a contradiction. Societies is made in such a dialectical way that there must be contradiction, and it is in the inherent contradiction that leads to progress, to the next stage. So it cannot go without saying that NRM founded, for example, since the Bush War up to now, it cannot exist without contradictions. Young ones come up, and young ones come up with their view. That is natural. Even in a family, you cannot stay with a family for all these years without schools of thought or contradiction coming up. But for us, we are saying in the party, that is, if I say for us, I mean as a director in the party, what we are saying is that whatever level or nature of contradiction, I think constitutionally we have the capacity to contain it. In as far as if you're talking of change of leadership, whether it was being raised by the young or raised by the old, or even raised by a particular region of the country. For example, if a region is saying Ankole has had enough, we want it to the east. Or if the north was saying Ankole has had enough, we want. So whatever kind of contradiction that is in, whether it is generational contradictions, where another generation looks it in another way and another generation looks at that is it. So that is contradiction. So therefore, just what I want to say is that such contradiction manifest their tendencies in a phenomenon that you cannot do without. But what matters is how is it resolved? And normally it is resolved in the sentiments of how fair it is to the majority. Okay? How fair it is to the majority. So we have a coded meaning written down, a coded procedures in our constitution, how we change it. So whoever is exercising his views, whether generational views or regional views, we shall finally come to resolve it.
All right, fair enough. Doctor, let me get back to you. Let's put Parliament on the spotlight for a second. If you compare Parliament's performance last year and you look at the role that the Honorable Abdul Katuntu Committee on Rules performed, Parliament became sort of a school of morals, whereby it was either the Honorable Zaki that was being summoned for disciplinary actions and things like that. So as we move towards 2023, actually we're already in 2023, we have seen Parliament being recalled from recess, but top on the agenda is the censure of the Honorable Persis Namuganza. So Parliament and its role of oversight, legislation and appropriation, do we hope to see much more from them this particular year?
Maybe if I may start from the African proverb that a society can only bequeath two things to its children: roots and wings. So you have a leadership in Parliament that is not properly grounded, both in the politics of the day, but also in terms of stature, the kind of stature required to lead an institution of Parliament. In my view, the leadership is not grounded. They could have done a favor to themselves by using the past year to do more learning, to do more experience sharing. Of course, it's learning on the job, but instead they are, consumed with bickering, with petism, with the fake celebrity status, and a race of the stature as envisaged in the Constitution for leading such an arm of government. And their grounding then directs how Parliament is run. Their focus is a personal fights. They do heavy lifting in things that are minor. They major in minors. Parliament has serious work to do, especially in a situation where the country is in an economic dilemma. Economic dilemma in such a way that the size of our court is beyond the piece of cloth available to us. The country generates in this financial year 21 trillion. Out of that, 18 trillion goes into debt payment and servicing. In the next financial year, where we are projecting 50 trillion for the budget, we project to generate 28 trillion, assuming that there will be economic growth. But when you look at the welfare of citizens, I don't see where that economic growth will come from to generate 28 trillion. But even out of that, what remains, 30% of that will go into interest on debt. Away from debt challenges and dilemma, we have extravagance within the expenditures of government. Just in the last quarter, almost all government departments were buying cars on borrowed funds. our priorities are to buy cars, extravagant cars. The president told the country to be frugal. Even he himself acquired a new set of latest Mercedes-Benzes. Under that frugality, under the challenges of Ukraine war, inflation, and high cost of living, but also high debt on us as a country. So we spend money we don't generate. We spend money on extravagant things. Just last year, government added money to the Gostorubowa Hospital in December. So, Parliament has a lot of work to do, but they lack leadership. And I don't think they have capacity to do proper checks and balances and execute their functions as envisaged under Article 79 of the Constitution.
And this lack of capacity, Doctor, cuts across both sides of the aisle. Both government and the side.
Yes, I did say, taking you back to the African proverb, you can only bequeath your children with roots and wings. Roots for them to be grounded in life, and wings, an opportunity to fly. But now on the part of executive, so you have people flying also with no roots. They think of self other than the country. The things they do, including the president. The president has selfishly kept in power, even when he knows that his leadership is in diminishing returns. His preoccupation is to keep in power and maybe possibly die in power. His preoccupation is not to develop Uganda. That's why you see we have abductions. Even when they pretend that they don't know, they know. They know. They commission forced disappearances. So long as the people disappearing are disrupting your dream of keeping in power, then it is okay. So when you have a leadership that has also narrowed its interest to keeping in power against all odds, then you do not expect any grounding of such a leadership. And maybe to be fair to President Museveni, he told us that he had commissioned a cabinet of fishermen. We all know that fishermen do not own anything. They don't own the wreck. They don't own the nets. They don't own the fish.
Why don't they own
I
the
am
net?
coming.
The net.
You will explain
don't they
which
own the
fishermen have you seen. They are always hired. Use this net, catch fish. Maybe you eat one, you go and sleep. Then you put the others for sale for the owner of the net. So he commissioned that cabinet of fishermen. Maybe he was telling us that there's nothing much to expect.
Professor, nothing much to expect. Ugandans out there, what they expect of their government, and in this I mean the three arms, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, is they expect services. That's all Ugandans need. So, but for these services to reach Ugandans, the three arms of government, if I'm to use the words of retired Chief Justice Odoki, that they are like three cooking stones. They must work together so as to serve Ugandans. So if you compare the incidents of last year, how would you evaluate the relationship between the three arms of government? Because at some cases, we saw one arm of government overreaching, the other then we saw some sort of resistance from another. And that kind of working relationship affects service delivery. So the question is then, how best do you think that these three arms of government, one, can improve their working relationship so that the sole beneficiary at the end of the day are the Ugandans?
Thank you. You said the function or the role of government is service delivery. Maybe service delivery is narrow. It should also be public goods and services. Because public goods is much more than services. Here we are not talking about social services only. We are talking about, for example, security.
Education.
We are talking about also creating a nation. Because we are still a geographic expression. We are expecting that a state, that public infrastructure should, of course, facilitate the delivery of services to the people for their welfare, but also should provide security as well as construction of the state, of state institutions. The challenge of Uganda and Africa generally, why, for example, the same countries in Southeast Asia, which were also under colonial rule, were at the same level of development like us, have gone ahead of us, is among other factors, lack of a sustainable state, a public institution committed to serving the people, committed to meritocracy, not manawani, and we expect a state to work like that. Coming back at your question about the three arms of government, that analogy or that metaphor of three arms, because in the normal functioning systems, by the way, you either have two arms or you have four, like animals, they have arms and legs. They are four in order to balance. Now, our three arms of government are not functioning equally at the same level. We call it horizontal decentralization or horizontal sharing of power. There is a lot of imbalance where the executive dominates the other arms of government, and in that respect, it has made them remain infants. They are not growing, so that they provide checks and balances. That is why, for example, even the president the other day, he said, Parliament passed something, this Vinci Coffee something, and he said, yeah, I will do my things, let it go there. But I thought that was supposed to provide the check to the executive. And you have the judiciary, which is also supposed to interpret the constitution accordingly and assist, even make laws. I have lawyers here, they can assist us here. Even you are a young lawyer, you are an upcoming lawyer. They say the lawyers or the judiciary or the members, is it of the bench? They can also create law.
Yes.
After all, we are in
jurisprudence.
we are in this common law. So we expect the three arms of government, mainly the legislature and the judiciary, to wake up and make sure and claim their space, so that we are not saying they shouldn't work with the executive. They all have to work together, but they have to balance their power. Now, why they don't balance their power is a question of values and norms that people have that govern the country or prevail in the country. But secondly, also there is I think there is a lack of norms of courage in this country. Courage is not necessarily brevity, being brave. No, the brave people normally, when there is danger, they just face it without fear. You can have fear, but have courage to stand against something, as long as you have a principle. So part of lack of courage is lack of principles and norms that govern our thinking, that govern our commitment to do what we want to do. I was listening to BBC last night, I had a talk yesterday, and there was a lady from America who's married to a Russian activist, who, after the invasion of Ukraine, that gentleman from Russia was opposed to the invasion of Ukraine. He had never been poisoned. He had never been arrested many times. He was living in the USA, by the way, at the time of invasion of Ukraine. And he told the wife and the others, I am going to Russia because we have to oppose this invasion. That's what he believed in. Now I'm not talking about the merits or demerits of invasion or not, but that person. In other words, I'm illustrating courage. He said, I am going there, and I know I am going to be arrested, but I am going there to at least air out my concerns and the concerns of others, about what is happening in my country and in the world. Anyway, I was restricting courage. We Ugandans are lacking in courage. They don't want to speak out. They don't want to tell the others that, please, let's develop this country, govern this country, move this country toward this direction. When you meet them in private, they are whispering. At times they tell you, why don't you go and say this one? But what about you? You also say it. Why don't we stand on our grounds and mention what we think is right and we move this country forward? So there is a something that is in a deficit in this country, largely at an individual level and community level and group level. It is a question of courage. People should have courage, not necessarily to confront. We are interacting. We are a society that should interact. If we have to build a sustainable society, we have to imbibe the norms of courage, not necessarily bravery, but courage to speak out, to voice out, and courage also to sacrifice. We need also to sacrifice some of our lifestyles. We have to sacrifice in some respects of our comfort. We have to sacrifice in order to move this country forward. Otherwise, we are marching time. You can imagine this conversation that started since we started. Everybody, they say, what do you expect next year? We are uncertain on one hand. On the other hand, that 2021, we ended it with tear gas. We have started 2023 with tear gas. We ended with road carnage. We have started with road carnage. We ended with rigging of elections. We have started with rigging elections. We ended with corruption. We have started with corruption. We ended with poverty. We are continuing with poverty. I mean, we ended with poor service, poor quality of education. We are beginning with poor quality of education. We ended with poor services in hospitals. We are beginning with poor services in hospitals. Can't we say we can do something about our situation ourselves, as the Baganda say, Nkobazambo go? It is our us Ugandans, individually and collectively, to be courageous enough to sacrifice our comforts and make sure that we have a breakthrough. Otherwise, this country will remain marching time, always complaining about colonialism. Southeast Asia was under colonialism. Singapore in 1960s came to borrow a leaf of our public service here. They have the best public service now. In other words, we are not lacking good laws. We are not lacking good framework, legal frameworks, even institutional frameworks. We are lacking norms of public service, of public good, the greater good, to serve our fellow citizens and our country. And we are lacking courage. We have just retreated into our self-service. We have retreated into, let me do what I can in order for me to survive. Let me build a good house and put a wall of fence. And you have now a group of people called gated communities. They will still find you on, those thieves will still find you on the bypass, and they will shoot you, even if you are living in a gated community. We have these Karamajongo children and others, actually, street children are now everywhere. They are not only in Kampala. They are in Soroti, they are in Mbare, they are now in Barara, they are in Guru. And we just look at them, roll our glasses up, and just pass, and it seems as if nothing happens. Those kids, when they become 15, where do they go? Do you see them there? They are the ones shooting us, and they will shoot us. Now, to have a sustainable society, people should think beyond self-interest.
Thank you. Retired Major, clearly from the words of Professor, I read so much cynicism and doubt. But your role as the ruling political party is to inspire Ugandans and give us more hope. So the question around insecurity. Last year ended on a terrible note regarding insecurity of this country. from the police posts that were being attacked, from the question around the ADF and things like that. And even this year, they have continued. I listened to the spokesperson of the UPDF, and he was trying to narrate the new insurgents of the ADF. So how prepared are we as a country to deal with the issues of insecurity?
Mr. Moderator,
in this particular area?
you'll excuse me for lending you some other question or some other related question for him to answer very well. You have talked about security from that point of view of armed conflicts. There is public safety. Actually, public safety has taken more lives if you consider how many people are experiencing violence of robbers, of domestic violence. How do we ensure public safety? Citizen security, public safety, in addition to state security.
Retired Major, the question is home.
Yes, but you see my position as from the ruling party makes me comment a lot about issues that are raised. Because I feel that if they're not, then it may be a kind of misinformation.
Construed to be true.
Now, Professor talked about Uganda being a geographical entity. True. We all know that Uganda became actually the current construct on the 1st of February 1926. That is what you could actually call the birthday of
Maybe
Uganda.
Citizenship, Ugandan citizenship. Otherwise, 1894 marks the creation of this geographical entity.
No, but we are also talking of a time. We're also talking of a time when Kisoro finally came back, the time when West Nile came back from Congo, and the time when we lost the other part to Kenya, which Amin was claiming. So it could be debatable, but 1st February 1926. So we became a construct of what it is. If you compare with other European states, for example, you have German for the Germans, you have France for the French, except where you have in Switzerland, where you have Swiss Italian, Swiss German, and the rest, and in Belgium. But even in Belgium, which is not a nation state, they pose a threat up to now. They're almost as unstable as Africa. So therefore, they cry for a strong state system. But for them, for Belgium, for example, there are also like 4 communities combined. Switzerland, if I may go back, for example, the football coach of Switzerland has to use English to coach the team. Because you have Swiss who are French, Swiss who are German, Swiss who are Italian, Swiss who are what, and they're in regions, and they have a federated system. So I just like to join that. And that is a cry and a chance that for us in the party, we keep asking for mandate in our manifesto, because we strongly believe that we want to be given chance to build that state. You now ask yourself, why is it that the Kenyans can do that and not the Ugandans? Is it because Ugandans are cowards? No, power belongs to the people. When you see the people not rising up, it means their needs and their aspirations are met.
Information.
Yes, needs and the aspirations are met.
Information.
So, can we take this information?
Yes, I want to inform the director that in Uganda, power belongs to the gun. I know that the constitution says power belongs to the people. But how does your regime behave when people try to petition? Our constitution provides for peaceful petition under Article 29. But whenever citizens get on the street, people would receive dead bodies in their homes.
You know what I'm trying to say, Sarah, is that I am a soldier. I'm telling you, no amount of aeroplanes, no amount of tanks, no amount of guns is stronger than the people. When you see the people not rising, it means the needs of the people are met. And that's the difference. You may misjudge it from an individual lack of satisfaction, but the average is not. But there's no tank, no helicopter, nothing that is stronger than the people. So when you see the people of Kenya saying they can rise and Ugandans can't, don't go to a witch doctor to get the reason. The reason is the people are happy with the status quo,
But
not the fear of the tongue.
there was no demonstrations during Idi Amin's time. Let's give a clear example. Does that mean people were satisfied with Idi Amin? There were no demonstrations. There were no marches here in Kampala. There was no shouting even. You couldn't even tell Idi Amin that you are misgoverning this country. Does it mean we were satisfied?
When you talk of demonstration vis-a-vis the courage, I won't go into.
Otherwise, there are people who have gone to the bush.
So,
if you want to use that yardstick.
And again, I want to develop this point further, that when you see some people not talking in, let's say, the domain that you have, part of what hinders the talk is that institutional governance. For example, if you're in cabinet, you are expected to voice your opinion within that body. And therefore, such a person, you don't expect him to come outside and talk also. Okay? So you have to go inside where they work and see if he's quiet. But many people that you see voice their concerns in the perimeters of where they are. And if their views are taken, then it is. If their views are not taken, there it is. That's why you see such a person comes outside and keeps quiet. And that is the only way a society can be governed. If, for example, you were to raise your voice or your views in cabinet and it is rejected, and you come outside to do the same, then it brings anarchy. So I want to say about the courage. So I just wanted to comment about the courage that the professor said and the nation state that I started with. Now, to your question is about the security. One thing I would like really to say is that you can...
Of course, my question was enjoined by professors as
Public safety.
Public safety. So
yes, but let me start with armed insecurity. It appears, and I think it is a fact, that NRM, the brain works faster when you confront with insecurity. In fact, I don't advise the opponents to try that. You actually legitimize our force on you. And it is well tested.
Okay.
It is well tested.
Now you confirm that. Yeah.
It is well tested, because if you try an illegality on armed struggle, then you can't really go far. In other words, the security apparatus, the security system that is well built with its intrinsic philosophy has the capacity to make the country be at peace, whether ADF or anything. Okay? And I don't think that those who have seen it tried, have seen it, but it can't work. So I just like to say, on the side of the armed conflict, it will be contained and it won't be a bother in the shortest time possible. So there's no need to worry. What worries me, though, is the non-military conflict that he calls the public safety. Because the non-military conflict, the non-military security threat, are more in us. Like Swahili says, what eats you is the lice in your clothes. It's not coming to eat you from outside. And it is, as he puts it, a public good. It's not a security where you find the forces are defined and they know each other. Now, this has a multiple approach. And of course, it is being combated. It has a multiple approach in that the economic systems are are driven towards that, because many of them has economic facets. You can say it has consciousness facets, but some will believe that if you solve the fundamental basis, the economic basis, then the consciousness will automatically form. Therefore, it's a concern, it's identified, and already systems are in place to address it. It is much more difficult to address, in my opinion, than the armed security threats. But overall, measures are in place to say all those security threats will be addressed, to the extent that come closer of 2023, we expect, if there was an independent poll like we have always led. You have always known that Uganda leads in happiness in East Africa. That is an independent
What
policy.
does that mean to be happy?
Whichever ingredients is put in, but the bodies.
Major, do you know that when somebody is on enjoy, is high, on marijuana, is very happy?
I don't think that is the happiness that is judged. That is not the happiness that is judged.
Happiness is so subjective.
So the happiness,
be happy
What
because
happiness?
the happiness
We
is
are also the
a
number one
multitude of
drunkards.
problems. It's a multitude.
In
Happiness
South Africa.
in a sense that first of all it is reflected in the well-being of the person. Because if a person doesn't have good well-being, he cannot be happy.
Where does Uganda?
But whatever it is,
Where does Uganda feature in Human Development Index?
we have challenges like any other country. We do it. We like any other country. But whoever does the measurement and finds out that Uganda's happiness leads in the region, I am not part of those who check the checklist, but they have a checklist devoid of my interference or even devoid of NRM interference. It is an independent body. So what I'm saying here is that come the end of 2023, we expect to lead in happiness.
All right. As you expect to lead in happiness, we also expected to take a short commercial break right now, and just keep with us. See you shortly after this commercial break. Bye-bye. Yes, viewers, we'll be back from that short commercial break, and of course, thank you for keeping it on the Citizens Chat Show. Doctor, before we shift gears to discussing the economy as our second phase of this conversation, is the aspect of human rights. Last year, at least as far as social media, print media, and mainstream media showed us, was that the level of our human rights had largely degenerated. From the conference that happened in Nairobi to the images that we saw, I don't know, as we move towards this particular year, do we expect to see a more civically aware population that can stand up and say, I have a right to do this, and, put the government to account? And I mean, do we expect to see a more civically competent population to demand for their rights?
You know, the more President Museveni keeps in power, against all odds, the more the degeneration of governance, and at the climax of this, unfortunately, is the human rights and the people's lives are at stake. President Museveni, after 30, now he's going to 40 years in power. After 4 decades in power, he can only keep himself in power by using force. That is violence by state organs that he can still manipulate, and excessive bribery. World over, any leader that rules beyond 20 years, I think you can point at only 3 examples of leaders globally that have stayed sane beyond 2 decades in power. That is the Prime Minister of Singapore. You can look at Fidel Castro. He stayed sane until he handed over power peacefully. And Mwalimu Nyerere, who ruled for 21 years. He was also still the Nyerere people knew, with his weaknesses.
24 years.
24 years, yeah, but he was still the same leader that people could associate with. President Museveni, after 20 years, started becoming the direct opposite of the President Museveni people knew from 86. Now he's a complete stranger in terms of valuing people's lives, in terms of recklessness in bribery, voter bribery, citizens bribery. That's why he cannot get out of his house without boxes of money, because he must buy his legitimacy wherever he goes. And that's why he has a budget of 1.86 billion per day. Do you think that that money is used to buy food? That is a budget for his household. 1.86 billion per day. It is for bribing his way, buying legitimacy wherever he goes. At one time, he carried the money in a sack. He must dish out envelopes. He must bribe his legitimacy wherever he goes. In the absence of bribery, then he uses force. I know that publicly, people in government try to deny knowledge of kidnaps. But there is no state organ that can fail to trace people conducting kidnaps if they were not the ones sanctioning and protecting the people doing kidnaps. Awich has just told us that in terms of violence, they are sure that you will legitimize their use of unlawful force in
Is
power.
that my words?
That's the interpretation of
No.
what you said. Do you will state what
You are
you said?
interpreting it.
You
or
said you are
misinterpret-
justifying our use of force. That's how you put it.
Mm.
But I'm putting it in my own words. They are not your words.
They are your words.
So this government, in terms of armed conflict, in terms of use of violence, President Museveni has said on several occasions that he's a champion of violence. He works better. If you provoke him using violence, his head works better. Awich says NRM works better where violence is involved. They are propagating the highest form of violence on people through kidnaps, brutal kidnaps, torture, and forced disappearances and extrajudicial killings of people in the opposition. If you look at the demographics of this country, 78% of people below 30 years, they have nothing to do with the bush stories. When we were in the bush, we ate cassava. Recently, there was a bush trek. I don't know whether somebody was making fun, but somebody said it was on the advice of Mama Fina, that bush walk, to try to take young people through the journey of the bush. But they can't connect. This is a digital generation. They are on TikTok. They are on Instagram. They are watching Netflix. Then when we were in the bush, we ate cassava, we slept naked. So what? We have a constitution. Can you rule according to the constitution? So they have nothing to do with the bush war stories to blackmail their consciousness. So the president, and with the time, he will become more irrelevant to the young people who are the majority voters. So the only way now, you must either use money, or those who refuse money, then you use violence. And I don't see any way of how the abuse of human rights under this regime is going to stop. We are likely to see more kidnaps, increasing torture, more breakdown of rule of law, because of the illegitimacy of the regime.
Professor Mwambustya, do you want to comment on the issue of human rights?
Yes.
Yeah.
Human rights. What are human rights? You are lawyers here. Let's even extend the debate beyond the civil and political rights and both socio-economic rights. When you talk about the education in this country, access to quality education, when you talk about the 400,000 girls, teenagers who got pregnant, re-entry into school, are we looking at those? When we talk about economic rights, access to opportunities, when you look at the poverty map of Uganda, and you say in northern Uganda, mid-north especially, actually 68%, Karamoja 60-something percent, Bugisu I don't know which percent, Busoga I don't know which percent. You look at those rights, and you look at the state which is supposed to put in place opportunities for development, and people are lacking those aspects. We are talking about health rights. How many people trust that when you go to the hospital, you will get medicine, that you will get doctors there, and you will get the appropriate services? When you talk about transport, because it's also a right in a way. Kampala city or Uganda generally, urban Uganda, has no public transport. And you are in town in the evening and you can see how people walk all the way from Kampala to Kagoma to sleep and back in the morning. We are talking about those rights that we talk about housing. Look at the housing situation in the city, the urban dwellers, the slum, the situation of the slums in the country. We have to look at those other economic rights indicators, which are supposed to be also in a way promoted by the state. How much are we promoting those rights? We are talking about nutrition. Busheni, where she comes from, they used to claim that they are a model district. They are now a model district of malnutrition. The highest malnourished children are in Busheni.
Thanks to NIM.
Thanks to you. Model district. So we are talking about those rights. Now let's come to property rights. Property rights. I had something towards the end of last year that Entebbe Botanical Gardens that was set up before the turn of the 19th century. It was 18 something when the colonialists put up Entebbe Botanical Gardens. People are building in it. They have grabbed it.
First family.
They have grabbed Entebbe Botanical Gardens and all the forests in Entebbe, because there are forests in Entebbe which belong to National Forest Authority. I'm told now there are plots coming up for building. This is not to talk about the district farm institutes in this country that were grabbed, which would be demonstration farms for the citizens. We are talking about the grabbing of land in Nakawa. So when we are looking at rights, let's look at the issues of social justice and economic justice and even financial justice. This is not to belittle the civil rights, but also to look at the socio-economic rights and see to how far is government putting in place systems to promote these socio-economic rights of the citizens. Of course, there is some growth registered here and there as captured in the GDP per capita and whatever. But remember that some regions in Uganda today, according to WUBOS, the poverty rates have reduced up to 3%. 3%. Others are 68%. In other words, some areas are already in the middle income. They are going to the upper middle income. Some regions are sliding more into into poverty more. So overall, as a government, what measures, what plans, what programs are put in place to reduce this inequality? Earlier alone, you asked Major about security. You know, security risks include corruption. Yes, how much is government tackling corruption, both economic, financial corruption, and political corruption? Because there is political corruption also. You talk about employment. Can anybody tell us that unemployment rate in Uganda is coming down? Yesterday night I listened to the news. People were being asked in Nansana what can be done to reduce insecurity in Nansana. And those ordinary people said employment. The unemployment has increased the insecurity in that region. So the right to employment is a human right. You are lawyers here, you know that. What is government doing to put in place, or what has it done to put in place opportunities for all, not opportunities for a few, opportunities for all, so that we address the question of unemployment. Because unemployment can lead to insecurity. Insecurity, and this can come at the level of public safety. We are talking about insecurity in terms of these people who perished in the Freedom City, which is not freedom, which does not provide freedom. Ironically, that is public security, or public safety. When you talk about the road carnage, that is public security. When you public safety. When you talk about robberies, so there's rights, the civil and political rights that we have focused on, and I'm not in any way suggesting that we should not look at them, but we should also look at socio-economic rights and look how far is Uganda faring in respect of socio-economic rights, because most Ugandans, by the way, do not mind about sometimes these civil rights and the freedoms. They are pursuing survival rights. So how much is government going to orient itself towards providing opportunities for Ugandans accessing and enjoying civil, social and economic rights? So we should also focus our debate on socio-economic rights that Ugandans need to enjoy.
Thank you. Retired Major, I'm sure you have a comment regarding the issue of human rights, but as you do so, part of the conversations that have spilled over from last year is one of the constitutional reforms. And this has come from all angles. There is a faction that thinks that it is due time we talked about federal, for example, the federal system of governance. But also we know that we have local government. So how do we connect the two? But also two is that the aspect of land reforms. I think yesterday or the day before, I saw the Buganda Parliamentary Caucus, discussing the issue of land reforms in Buganda. So is it about time that we discussed constitutional reforms, or in your own view, you think that the constitution as it stands right now is still the national consensus of Ugandans? So from where you're seated, as someone who is the acting director of legal in the NRM, do you think it's about time we discussed constitutional reforms in this country? And if so, what are some of those provisions you think we need to think about?
Okay, your question is it constitutional reform and land reform.
Yeah.
But as you said, I had something to comment before I come to that. First, Sarah made an overarching comment about extrajudicial killings. I think that is a very strong indictment, and I like to strongly dissociate myself from that, because you can accuse NRM of many things, but not extrajudicial.
Who killed people in Kampala in November?
You can accuse NRM, for example, if you wish, by luring opponents, say by placement in jobs or money, okay? That one is debatable, that you bring opponents because you give them jobs or you give them money, but to accuse an NRM of extrajudicial killing, that doesn't happen. That has not been the modus operandi of Museveni.
Who killed people in Kampala streets on November 18th and 19th?
You see, extrajudicial killing, if you may wish to define, it's actually an intentional getting somebody and killing without due process of the law. But if you're talking of, say, accidental shooting on the street, that is
more
not
than 100 people.
The extrajudicial, those are the figures that came from I don't know where. But I like to say that there is no extrajudicial killing by its definition of intentionally killing somebody outside the law. No. The other comment I want to clarify is
maybe before we fact the information, please.
Yes, Doctor.
For the record and for the benefit of the viewers, Ugandans were killed in broad daylight on Kampala streets in November 18th and 19th, 2020 by state agencies. There is a documentary, 3 killings in Kampala on BBCI. You can get details and see the shooting. I'm saying, no, I'm saying for evidence, if those who didn't watch. The state acknowledged 54 people died through stray bullets. I mean, really, who is fooling who? The documentation of other human rights agencies points to more than 100 people dead. That is one example of extrajudicial killings. For the second information, I attended the human rights meeting in Kenya.
Do you also mean the Kasese incident? Is it part of?
Of course, even Kasese is extrajudicial killings. I mean, there are so many. Even the Kasese and attack on Rwenzururu and just shooting people. I mean, what is an extrajudicial killing? If somebody has committed a crime, arrest them. Take them through the due process of the law. Even when you are recently doing arrests
So
of
are
some
you
Muslims,
informing me or you're
where
making a substantive
I
submission?
am informing you still that there
This is
are
longer
several
than
cases
information.
of extrajudicial killings. The last one in Kenya, when we were attending the Human Rights Commission meeting by the Kenya Human Rights Commission on the human rights situation in Uganda, there were several testimonies of people tortured and killed by state agencies in custody. I mean, what is extrajudicial killings?
Retired Major.
Extrajudicial killing is the intentional arrest by a state agent and going ahead to kill the person. It is different from accidents or deaths that occur in an operational activities. And for the case of 54, those are somebody's data. For the case of Nairobi, we do not know who was taken to
54
testify.
is the government record.
To testify. So I want to rest my case on extrajudicial. Now, on the issue of the stories, the Bush war stories, is that if anybody mentions Bush war stories, it's just mentioned, there's a professor of history here, that we only learn history to compare with the present so that it may help us to determine the future. That is the only historical aspect. But we are not saying bury yourself in history. We learn history so that we understand the phenomenon, the occurrences in history, compare with the current president, current present, so that it can help us to see the future. That's why we learn history. So if anybody mentions...
another one which I can add.
Yes?
Sometimes we tell history in order to legitimize power. We instrumentalize history to legitimize power. I have rested my case.
Okay, maybe that is for some people. That is for some people. But that is, so for us, if you hear any mention of Bush stories, it's basically to let the young ones know what happened, compare with what is now, and can help you to determine the future. That is it. So whoever feels bad about mentioning of the Bush stories did not get the concept. So that is my comment about those two issues. On human rights, I associate myself with what the professor said about human rights. Of course, we know as a country that we have the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And we also are part of the civilized nations. We have ratified several international instruments on human rights, including civil and political rights, economic and cultural, and other specific instruments, including the Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers, this one who go to Saudi Arabia, of course. And maybe a text just to explain that in that, and this has been a misrepresentation on the side of government. The global sphere of labor has changed. In Europe, they have old people. In some aspects, they don't have this labor power. So the world saw that because the world has imbalance in labor, the world came up with a convention on the rights of migrant workers, which is a very serious right. Uganda has ratified. Why did the world come in that? Because they saw around the world there was imbalance. So the migrant working to Middle East is because there is that imbalance of that kind of labor. Okay, and Uganda takes a small fraction compared to Kenya and other countries. Now, you will wish to know that Philippines takes 10 million nurses around the world. 10 million. They are the most active members in the Convention on Migrant Workers. Colombia, no, Mexico has 11 million people in the United States, workers. In fact, Mexico has done it to the extent that they even acted a movie of 1 minute without a Mexican, because they said, America is so proud. Can we, in ideal way, withdraw 11 million and we see if you survive? So these are rights, and the misrepresentation here is that in an abstract of imbalance of labor power, they say NRM is taking people to Arab world. It's a whole world dynamics. If Philippines alone can take 10 million, Mexico 11 million, everybody, and we don't even have a million. So all that we have to address is, and the convention prescribes all that you are saying. How do you protect the rights of those in the host country, in the country of origin? How about their family? How about their contract? It's all so if they still challenge, there's challenge. But what I'm saying is, We are bound by many conventions, including equality of women, children's rights. And as a country, we report on them. Recently, the Attorney General reported on Convention on Against Torture. You saw that clip where they said some women entered the room, okay, not by denying. The reporting procedures are clear. You are given a form on what you report. You don't just go by your own self and say, I'm the Attorney General, I've come to report. There's a format given to you to report on. Can you answer this? Can you answer this? Can you answer this? So you don't say Attorney General went and denied. No. And there are very many checklist procedures there that you can't tell a lie. For example, there's a provision for civil society reporting. You are part of it. You should have known. Okay? Civil society reporting. There's what is called the shadow report or the alternative report. That should have checked government before government report. So all these methods and mechanisms are in place. So we are bound to observe international ratified instruments, and coming back to home, Human Rights Commission, we gave them their independence and the autonomy. They should be seen to do their work. On the part of the state, the laws that are in place, for example, Anti-Torture Act, for officers or cadres, for want of better words, who will act outside their mandate, the law will continue to prosecute them. So, on the ground in the theater, we shall continue to, including education of officers in active service, human rights education will be given to them, to the police, to the soldiers, to the intelligence agencies. There will be continuous education on human rights. So we shall do that. Now, to your question on constitutional reform, I start by saying that a law is dynamic. It's not cast on stones. And new challenges will always pose a challenge in any piece of legislation that you have. Even if I don't have any problem with the Constitution as it stands, I still feel that anybody who feels he has a voice to feel there is need an amendment should follow the due process. But if you wake me up now and tell me, do you want the Constitution amended? I will look through from Article 1 to the end, I'll say, I have nothing. But let us take that.
Would you want, for example, term limits to be restored?
I'm not really thinking about it, because I thought, my thinking is that we could still exhaust the 5-year period to vote out a person out or vote in. So I still feel there's that window of the 5 years. So I don't think I would spend my time on that. Now,
how about the issue of land? Because we are shifting,
land, that's what I'm coming to.
Yes, we're shifting towards the economy, and you know that land is a very important factor of production.
You see, land, we have had metamorphosis of land. You recall that the Means Decree gave land to the state.
Yeah.
Land was belonging to the state. Then the 1995 Constitution gave land to, who did the Constitution give to?
The citizens.
Yes,
land
you're
belongs to the
right.
citizens.
I wanted to see that because there are two similar provisions which confuse people. Power was given to
the people.
Power belongs to the people. Land belongs to the citizens. People take it as if they mean the same thing. Land belongs to the citizens. Power belongs to the people. So there's a difference in the framing. So the Constitution gave back the land to the citizens, and it has had its challenges. You want to construct a road, some people go and buy the land and inflate the price. But I think more importantly is the dual nature of ownership in Uganda, where you have the legal landowner and then the squatters on it. And all these are intention. So no bank would give the other landowner a loan, for example. Because the bank will give you a loan for what? When you have squatters who will disturb us. At the same time, the squatters can't get a loan because they are not the owners. So that fixed is what it really needs to be resolved. Government has tried by giving land fund that please pay off these squatters or pay the landowner, and these people have it. Let it resolve. Let it be resolved. Either you resolve it in favor of the landowner or you resolve it in favor of the squatter. Either way. So it has to be resolved. But the resolution has tended to be not smooth. So I believe that there's a need to address the land question.
All right.
Yes?
Thank you. No, thank you. I'll
No,
move
but
to
can he make
sir.
another submission? Maybe if we will, we can, on public land that is being grabbed or has been grabbed
By people
and
in the
continues to be
government.
grabbed. What is government doing about public land? Is it the solution or it is a problem itself?
No, it is a solution. If I borrow your word grabbing, or I can even substitute it for a more legal term, accusation. If you acquire what you call a grabbing, if you acquire public land illegally, that's a crime. It is what needs to be fought. We have to put to government. I am part of government for that case because we form government. We need, if it is that a serious problem of people illegally acquiring public, it's like somebody illegally acquiring a government car for that case.
Maybe a
Or
question.
government property.
Maybe a
So if
question.
land is an issue, that there is illegal acquisition of public land, that is a criminality.
Maybe a
That is
question.
corruption.
Yes.
It must be combated.
Richard Major.
Did Sudir buy former Shimon land where there is a kingdom of Aked?
Sarah, as you know, that is a very specific question.
Yes.
That needs me to check the papers, needs me to check. I can't
Please
answer.
check. You can
I can't
answer
check.
and the next
Those are
All
very
right.
specific. I can only
can.
talk on broad policy or legal matters,
Thank
not
you.
the specific of a case
Thank
like
you.
this one was bought or not.
Thank you. Doctor, I want us to move towards the economy. But I know maybe you have a comment or two about constitutional reforms that you think we need to fast track. But as we shift gears towards the economy, is that as we closed 2022, our debt burden was, I think, clocking 17 trillion, if I'm not mistaken. But also
17.
No,
80.
80 trillion.
80 trillion rather.
Yeah.
Yes. But also, as we closed the previous year, government continued to borrow. So in this particular year, what do you think are some of the fiscal policies? Because I know that at some point the central bank raised their interest rate, which was in fact communicating to commercial banks that you should limit borrowing. All right? Okay, limit, yes, borrowing is the word.
Lending.
Yes, lending rather. So how do you think we shall approach the economic situation? Is it about the parish development model? What exactly is going to help us build this economy?
Maybe before I comment even on the constitution, I just want, for the benefit of the viewers, to read the definition of extrajudicial or extralegal killings. The definition is that this is a deliberate killing of a person
Deliberate.
without the lawful authority
Yes.
granted by a judicial.
Yes.
Proceeding.
Not accident, not shooting in riot.
Can you?
Deliberate.
You have had your time.
Yes.
So
But even
what
Bible,
the
when you read the
definition-
interview.
what the definition presumes is that killings should only be authorized by court for people who are sentenced to die by hanging. Otherwise, nobody has a right to take another person's life. So when you look at the conduct of the regime,
So the word deliberate is idle and redundant in your definition.
can I make my submission? You can ask a moderator for information. And I normally get his authorization to interject. So if you look at the conduct of the regime, for example, Kasese killings, you go, say the Mumbere has arms, and you attack, run down a palace, arrest people, women were paraded naked. I still have a memory of those pictures. The women in the palace who were lined up naked, whipped, some people shot, and only to discover a few pangas and spears in the palace. And then you wonder whether that was even a reasonable force, or if the security organs work, or whether the intention was just to degrade and, kill people in the palace. When it comes to the November killings, people were demonstrating, young people, after the arrest of Bobi Wine, and armed. In law, there is a provision for use of force, but that force must be proportional to the threat. So what threat do armed children pose for you to shoot, open a machine gun at them and kill all of them? That's why I referred viewers to the BBC documentary. It only investigated 3 death. But the aim was to show how government opened fire and killed citizens. Was there proportional force? And why can't it be then termed as deliberate? So that's why this regime has presided over. These are just few examples. There are so many cases of extrajudicial killings and torture presided over by the NRM regime. Away from that, do we need constitutional reforms? From the major constitutional reforms under Simpewa Commission in 2005, where there was an effort to popularly consult people on their views, then the political manipulation that twisted the commissioners then, and the events that led to Professor Sempewa releasing his minority report are still fresh on the minds of Ugandans, especially those that follow constitutional law, constitutional history and practices in this country. How the committee, led by then the late Jacob Olanya, may he rest in peace, bungled issues that led to the lifting of term limits are also fresh in the minds of Ugandans. And when you look at then 2017, the military attack on parliament, the arrest and beating of MPs in the chambers. You know, chambers are protected. Nobody's supposed to access parliamentary chambers armed. And neither are you supposed to fight, arrest, or do anything in those chambers. And even non-MPs and non-staff of parliament are not supposed to access parliamentary chambers. So the manner in which the UPDF, under the command of President Museveni, attacked parliament, went to the chambers, beat up MPs, arrested, 6 of them were arrested for 3 days, tortured. One of them is our associate here on the show, Honorable Monica Moding. That is the last memory of a constitutional amendment in this country. Obote did command at one time the military to surround parliament in the days that led to the Pigeon Hall Constitution. And in our constitutional history, that act of the military surrounding, not entering parliament, used to be regarded as the highest crime anybody can commit to the sanctity of parliament as a temple of democracy. But President Museveni exceeded the excesses of Milton Obote. And the military did not only surround, but they entered the chambers, beat up MPs, tortured them. Do you think that Ugandans are ready for a debate on constitutional amendments, given those 2 memories of abuse of our constitution?
Perhaps I will ask Professor to help us. Professor, is the country ready to discuss constitutional reforms? And if so, what particular provisions?
Maybe to reframe the question. Do we need constitutional reforms? I don't think we need. The constitutional reforms we have had actually have taken the constitution back instead of improving it. You see, that's the challenge. Why, when you talk about constitutional reforms, the government will actually embrace it, and then they will lead the reforms. So you can imagine that Sempewa report she is reporting to. Sempewa was a chairperson. Can you imagine a situation where the chairman of a committee or a commission gives a minority report? You are the chairman and you are the one presenting a minority report. What kind of commission was that? If it was not legitimizing a system. So they will go and say, when you ask for constitutional reforms like it was asked, constitutional and legal reforms, about the independence of the constitution, of the electoral commission, they will add there the word independent electoral commission. That's the reform. That's form, not substance.
Not substance.
That's not substance. So you can actually invite constitutional reforms, and then they will reform those ones which were even strengthening civil society voice. They will curtail them more. So it depends the atmosphere under which the constitutional reforms would be undertaken, and it should not just be by fashion. So you can actually invite constitutional reforms, and even the literal space, civic space and political space that there is can now even be more constrained. So the issue is not having constitutional reforms technically. We need to have a constitutional change politically, not legally. The issue is not legal issues.
The political
The issue is now political issues. How do we address the constitution politically, not legally? Legally, actually, I can assure those who want constitutional reforms in order to provide more space, they will lose more space. They will even lose the little window that there is. But it needs to be handled politically. So, a constitutional reform that is taken, through which the process is technical, is useless. You need a constitutional reform which is political.
Political process.
It needs a political process of courageous people, so that that reform is in substance, not in form. Otherwise, this form one will actually curtail more rights, because I mean, most people talk about constitutional reform. You have constitutional reform where they will say no more bail, isn't it?
Even they will make kidnaps.
Yeah, they will say that
it's a man of arrest.
Look, no more Milo land. This is not to say that I support Milo land or not, but so you those who are crying for constitutional reforms, you will have reforms that will curtail more freedoms, especially constitutional reforms that are going to be guided. You know, these days there is a political term called guiding. We shall guide you. Even when Kainerogawa speaks out and they say, why is he not being, we are going to guide him. So those who want constitutional reforms, you are going to be guided. So we are going to have guided democracy, guided constitutional reforms, and they will guide you to a situation which you may not like. So the issue is not constitutional reforms. The issue is political processes that will lead to designing a constitution, designing the laws, designing policies that aim at inclusive democracy, inclusive development, and sustainable society. Not necessarily even sustainable development, although that's desirable, but we need to have a sustainable society. As we are now, if you look at the political class disharmony in this country, you cannot see that Uganda's future is certain, because there is no minimum agreement on even development issues. No, this is not there. So the constitutional reform to do what? To reform what, which direction, and under what guidance? We need political guidance, not legal guidance. Otherwise, technicizing the constitution. But do we have a constitution even? You know, a constitution that was made about 20 years ago, 20-something years ago,
28 to this one.
has already been amended. More than 100 articles have been tampered with in such a short time. It has lost its sacredness, the situral sacredness, if I can put it that way. It has lost meaning, and therefore to reassemble it so that we have got a document that guides interaction of people and people, interaction of the state, institutions, interaction of the state and other countries. We need to go back to drawing board and craft, design a new constitution politically. On the political front, not on the legal front. This legalism they are talking about, me, I don't believe in it. We need to have a political process, a political exercise, so that all of us really are participating and not participated, and we have a document. But if we are going to have a document under political guidance, you can as well remain with even the little you have and fight over it. But to have a different one, even the little ability space for fighting will be taken away.
Thank you. I'm being signaled that our time is fast spent. We have to be out of here in the next 10 minutes. But let us just talk about the economy for a bit. Retired Major, what solutions are being discussed from the NRM on how to get the economy back to its feet?
Was it on its feet? Was it on the feet?
As you realize that, first of all, the time is not enough.
Yeah.
But I like to say that in our manifesto, which we're entering the third year of its execution, it's inbuilt there how to deal with the economy. And I also like to mention that this manifesto is not an abstract. It is taken from the National Development Plan. So we are executing part of the National Development Plan. Now, all systems and methods are there in place to put the economy in its growth that is being seen. But also, a lot of other things that will be done now this year is mitigating effect. Because the plan is there, the budget has been read, we are executing the budget. We're going to have another budget mid of this year. So all the systems are in place. The only challenge now is the mitigating effects. Mitigating means things that come which were outside the normal plan. Like we have had the corona, which still has an effect. We have had the war in Ukraine, which still has an effect. Short of that, the manifesto, which we are executing and we're in the middle of it, which is derived, as I said, from the National Development Plan, should be enough to make the economy run. So the issue that will come now is mitigating effects on things that were not, envisaged. Sort of that, the economy will be on its foot and it will be flowing.
Sarah, the economic question, the debt burden, how do you go about it?
Maybe just
and also, how do we realize domestic revenue?
One piece of information is that the 2021 elections were held after the first lockdown, or corona lockdown. And it was held under the guidance of corona by Ministry of Health. So you cannot say that you made a manifesto which did not envisage corona and its effect on the economy. I think that maybe you need to correct that. On the state of the economy, I think I want to borrow Dr. Kizza Besiege's words to say that finally maybe the economy will take President Museveni out of power. And I don't think they can fix it. Look at the appetite for expenditure in NRM. I've already mentioned that under the COVID environment, the president made a budget to enable him to spend 1.68 billion per day. And I forgot. So meaning that if we are not, this is the least money he can spend as a head of state under an economic crisis, 1.86 billion. Does that, look like a president that can take a country out of an economic crisis? Look at his appointments. Just recently, he appointed a presidential advisor on indigenous cattle with a person who hold a salary of 15 million under an economic crisis. He has numerous advisors, some of them with credentials. One would never have imagined that they would occupy such positions. Look at his cabinet. Under economic recession, he increased the number of ministers. Majority of them are even unknown to the people. I don't know how many Ugandans can name more than 10 ministers under this cabinet. From 80 to 81, The constitutional limit is 23 cabinet ministers with 23 deputies. He has never lived under that constitutional threshold. So one would have thought that a president with ability to take account out of an economic crisis maybe would have for once had a cabinet as envisaged in the constitution. President Ruto has 21 ministers. The Kenyan economy is 3 times the economy of Uganda. And those ministers include advisors. That is all. 21. In our case, even under crisis, you increase. Because of elaborate patronage, we have spent 1 year without the Bank of Uganda governor, with the economy on its knees. If today there was a need to print currency, whose signature would be there on the currency? We are still using currency. Sorry, and then this is not an attack on the memory of Governor Tumtevere, but we are still holding money 1 year before he's gone of his signature. Is it a ghost? So this level of incompetence, of greed, of lack of prioritization, you look at fake things. The president in his last speech said he will reinvent Bireete, who has taken money twice from Ugandans for a fake hospital and is pushing Bireete to steal citizens' coffee. Does that look like a president that can revive an economy? I think they don't have the capacity.
No capacity at all. Professor, because our topic, we have to talk about the political, social, and
No, we're talking economy now.
yes,
Economy.
and the economy. I'll just ask for your comments on the economy. Then we can briefly, in 5 minutes, talk about some social aspect. So the economy, how do we move forward?
If we were to move forward, we would have the capacity they are talking about. To me, is not the technical capacity, although that's necessary. It should be the normative framework, the norms capacity of serving the public good, not self-interest. As long as there is a regime normative framework of self-interest, one rhetoric here talking about progressive economics, progressive ideology, on the other hand, talking about acting reactionary, bourgeois conspicuous spending, with due respect to our speakers in the parliament. It was, in my opinion, scandalous when there is economic merit down. You start importing vehicles of 1.8 billion. 1.8 billion shillings when there is the economy going down. And all this conspicuous, we call it in Marxist political economy, bourgeois conspicuous spending, that the following day you even buy other vehicles which are equally very expensive. This is not a specific attack. It is a reflection of the normative framework that people do such a things. I import such scandalous, heavily scandalous vehicles, and they are at the helm of the economy. They are at the helm of the laws of the country. And this radiates everywhere. Now, we have a challenge. Let me talk about general challenge. Next time we should talk about economy only. But the challenges we have is that the cost of transport in Uganda is so high. The cost of water is so high. Maybe not so high. The cost of power is so high. The cost of capital when you borrow is so high that you can't have break even. That is why it is said Ugandans are the most entrepreneurial people, maybe in the whole of Africa. There is a high birth rate of economic business enterprises which do not see their first birthday. So the death rate, the mortality rate of enterprises is so high that almost it eats out every enterprise that is put up. And that's why we are still an LDC in general terms. We are a least developed country, GDP of 40 billion, when the turnover of Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook and these other Instagrams, whatever, is over I think 160 billion. So how do we make a turn around? One, we have to have an ideological shift and make sure that there is frugality in practice, so that there is public investment, because there is little public investment to spur development. Now, the little public investment we make also is accompanied by corruption. The money is taken away. So unless we have that change of attitude, they are talking about villagers changing the mindset. Please, listeners, the mindset is in Kampala. The mindset is the political class, not the peasants.
Do we need to drain
My
your
late
account?
mother in the 1960s was using a tractor. After about 50 years, I was the second person maybe who used the tractor in the village. So the mindset is the political class that is ruling this country. By the way, this time not opposition, not only opposition, not only government, even opposition, the way they behave ideologically, the way they also have appetite of spending and that of government. And you think you will have a progressive economy to come out of these doldrums where we are a least developed country with us those high costs? I mean, how can you buy those expensive things, pay yourselves allowances? How will even civil servants work? Because the civil servants contribute to the economy. Do you know many civil servants were not paid before they went for their holidays? Yeah. Do you know that is economic, that is salary rights? Yeah. Do you know that pensioners are not paid, including the pensioners of East African community, which broke up in 1977 when I was still in O level? They have never paid their allowances. How will you motivate civil servants or public servants to work? You see, when the public servants out there who are committed to work see that there is a lot of extravagance by others who tell you to tighten your belts as they loosen theirs, they also say, let's do like everybody. It looks as if in Uganda, when you follow instructions and laws and you follow frugality, you will be looked at as a fool. So everybody says now in Nyankore they have a saying, Nguni Kabetemere. Kabetemere was referring to a banana plantation that did not have an owner and anybody can go and harvest. To the extent that now you harvest even the minyara, these ones which are out of the banana stem, they are not yet even 3 months old, 2 months old. You go and harvest them because it is Kabetemere. Now, when you have a Kabetemere system whereby anybody can go berserk and abuse office and have political corruption, not economic, financial corruption, but political corruption, and buy vehicles scandalously, and then conspicuous spending, then the civil servant also, when he sees the political class that are supposed to provide the direction and political leadership, are scandalously spending extravagantly. Even this lower civil servant says that now this I am not a stupid dog. They say when the cow dies, there is no stupid dog. Any dog can go and get a piece, however much cowardly it might be. So please, unless there is a mindset orientation at the national public level, even at the grassroots, talk about this. Did you talk about the parish development model? We didn't participate in the debating it as citizens, as civil society. Is from civil society. It came from the blue, and it was there. This is not to say that I'm against it or it is going to be wrong, but if it is not owned by the citizens, and some people think they have a correct line, that there is going to be a parish development model. We have had other initiatives of a correct line. I don't know when it started bending, But citizens should own some of these processes.
Yeah.
But finally, I want to say that can't be economic transformation, especially investing in technology, a lot of money in technology transfer, in digital transfer, in a digital change. There cannot be that one unless public policies are publicly owned, and two, unless this bourgeois conspicuous spending, competition for building the best houses, competition for driving the latest cars, and expensive cars at that, competition for putting on the best suits that you can think about, competition for eating the most money from government, we are not going very far. There is need for mindset change at the national level. Not at the grassroots level is necessary, but the talk is as if there is mindset change at the
top.
It
Thank
is
you.
rotten at the top.
Thank you. Colleagues and senior citizens, our time is fast spent.
Yeah.
But it's only fair that I give you 30 seconds to just say goodbye to our viewers. Retired Major, our beginning viewers, I come this side.
Okay, viewers, this is 2023. Let's be involved in production at whatever level that we are in. I like to assure you that we're going to work to make sure that our relations with our countries around the world is good. I thank you.
Yes, Doctor.
I want to conclude by wishing the viewers again a happy new year, but also call upon them that we have work to do to put right matters in our country.
Yes, Professor.
We have to improve governance capacity
Extrajudicial
by reorienting our minds towards serving the public good
corruption.
and the greater good at the governance level. At the economic level, whereas there are very many ways in which we can invest our energies and monies and concentration, we are living in a technological age, in a knowledge age. Unless we have got more innovative centers and encourage our young people to innovate, we cannot compete in the current globalized world. We shall just remain in marching time, growing more beans, growing more potatoes, growing more coffee, and we shall not even have where to sell it
For bananas.
unless we have technological transformation of our society.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Retired Major, for sparing the time to be on this week's episode of the Citizens Chat Show. Well, to the viewers, thank you for joining us this particular week. We hope that you enjoy the Friday and, of course, enter the weekend in a joyous mood. But from us, we wish you a happy new year once again and see you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.